Challenge. Today we were talking about the importance of getting this generation of people, higher ed students, into CDR as quickly as possible and really expanding that workforce for carbon removal because the leaders of today will not be the leaders of tomorrow. I think of myself as in 30 years from now, when we need to be at that gigaton scale, I will hopefully be long retired and looking at the great work that these people who are in attendance and our finalists and the people who are competing in the Carbon Removal Challenge are going to be the leaders that we're looking to at that point. So we were inspired to do this webinar because we saw an article that sort of really resonated with what we are trying to do with the Carbon Removal Challenge. And so I want to first have our guests introduce themselves to talk about how they are connected to this process of getting future leaders into the carbon removal industry. So I'm going to start with Mijndert. Could you introduce yourself and sort of talk about your connection to carbon removal?
Okay, so yeah, happily. By the way, I live next to a train track, and sometimes the trains keep passing by. It's
There's construction going on in my apartment too. Zoom does an excellent job of
I know, but
filtering it
sometimes
out.
that is actually true. But sometimes I just don't hear myself anymore. And anyway, my name is Mijndert van der Spek. I'm an associate professor at Heriot Watt University, that's based in Edinburgh, in Scotland. We do a lot of work on carbon dioxide removal at Heriot Watt. We look mainly into direct air capture and things like enhanced weathering, ocean alkalinity enhancement, and other ocean-based methods. I suppose I got into CDR about 7 years ago when I was doing my PhD, and people told me about I want to work on capturing CO2 from the air. I was working on point source CCS, so I told them you're crazy because point source CCS are really difficult enough, and there's hardly any CO2 in the air. But then I did my postdoc in Zurich, and that was the place where two young chaps, now a little bit less young, but decided this was actually a good idea, and they founded a company, and they were actually doing it, and that changed my stance completely, and I found it massively interesting, especially because they were doing it using adsorption, which is a technology I fancy. And ever since, I've been very interested in direct air capture, and still working on that full on.
Thank you for that. Chris, can you introduce yourself now?
Yes, hi. Thank you for inviting me. I'm the Secretary General of the Negative Emissions Platform, which is a membership association based in Brussels. Our members are 50 plus companies from the CDR space, mostly suppliers of CDR, technology developers and project developers, but also some buyers like Microsoft and Stripe, and also other companies in the space that are, marketplaces or registries or VCs, other companies that create and make the market possible. I got into CDR 2.5 years ago. Before that, I had a longer career as a tech sector guy, policy guy in Brussels, and so I got into CDR, funnily enough, also with a link to Climeworks, Mijndert, because I actually applied for a job at Climeworks, and they said that while I wasn't right for that job, they had a trade association that they thought needed someone like me. So I joined at their suggestion 2.5 years ago.
Very cool. And finally, we have XiaoYu Wu from Waterloo University. And you have some slides you wanted to share as part of your introduction, XiaoYu?
Yes, I do. Sounds good. So, hello everyone. So my name is XiaoYu Wu. I'm assistant professor in Mechanical and Mechatronics Engineering at the University of Waterloo. So just give us a few slides of how I get into this and then how our team has developed. So this all started when I got a job from University of Waterloo, and then I was brainstorming with my friends, what should I do for my research, right? So actually, we come up with this sketch. There's a very funny sketch that we call it hairy airy. So the reason is because there's a head, because Waterloo is very famous for robots. So we have a lot of researchers on robotics. And then I was thinking, so maybe we should have a robot that have a lot of hair, but the hair is not the hair that we have, but they have some carbon, so for example, calcium oxide or some hydrogel, they can actually capture the CO2 from the air. So if these robots can go around the campus and then just have this beautiful hair getting around and capture all the CO2, and that would be wonderful. So that is how it got started, is this hairy airy. And then later, we are really fortunate to have Professor Matt Parker as a distinguished international visiting scholar at Waterloo. So he came to Waterloo for a term for his sabbatical, and then he introduced this idea of carbon capture, and then how we can excite our students about this new technology. So he organized a few workshops and seminars, and then also had this carbon capture design hackathon in Waterloo, and that's how we started. And so that is during COVID time, but we have some students on campus that can work together on these things. So later, it's our idea, it's a form, and then our students, so from the Engineers Without Borders at the University of Waterloo chapter, to help develop this student team for this design. So, and apart from that, we also started to apply for external funds to fund the student design team. For example, we have this Waterloo Engineering Endowment Foundation funds, and we receive some of this funding so the team can play together with all these things. So at the very beginning, we have some concepts, and then we designed some sketch, and then started to building this together. But at the beginning, we only can do different components. So we have the CO2 capture components, we have the algae growing components, and these are all tested individually 2 years ago. And then later we started to putting it together. So thanks to the students so Waterloo has very good co-op systems. So we have students that have very hands-on skills. So the students actually put together this wonderful frame. So this is an integrated frame, but some of the units are not functioning. They are just for demo purpose. So that is why we build on this frame and then keep working on it. And then so that comes here. That's finally, we are still doing some further research to see how we can improve this device. And then so these are some of the students on the design team this year. So just give you an overview of how our teams got here. Thank you.
Yeah, so University of Waterloo is the only university that's had finalists for all 3 carbon removal challenges at this point. So, and XiaoYu was the advisor for all 3 of them. So if there's anyone watching this who's considering going into carbon removal for grad school, or you're still looking for an undergrad institution, maybe University of Waterloo is for you. But not to turn this whole thing into an advertisement for University of Waterloo. The reason that we decided to do this webinar
Hang on, or Heriot Watt, of course.
There's other great institutions that you could also study carbon removal. I was going to kick it to you, Mijndert. So you actually held a workshop that was sort of the inspiration behind the article that was the inspiration for this webinar. So we'd love to talk a little bit about what that workshop was like, what inspired you to create it, and what findings you had from it, and was there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been thinking about training and education for CDR for a while, and what we've been trying to do is identify opportunities, but also how can we collaborate with other institutions and across the globe, right? So we set out with a number of North American and European institutions to draft something about how this could be done on an international scale or a global scale. But we were really interested in understanding how people from the CDR ecosystem look at that and what they think are the real needs in terms of knowledge, skills, capacity building, etc. So we convened workshops in Washington, D.C. And in Oxford, UK last year, around about a year ago. And they were relatively small workshops, but the important thing was that all the people that attended actually play a big role in the CDR community. So they're well-known people with a lot of experience and in organizations, either government or businesses or NGOs that really kind of pave the path, right, for CDR. And we quite literally asked them, in a little bit more of a structured way than just what do you think, but in these workshops. So what do you perceive as the largest training and research needs at the moment in the CDR space? And obviously, there's a couple of there's always a couple of things that you kind of expect, right? But I think one of the most important results or conclusions that we draw from these conversations was that we need to be mindful about both seeding, but also about reorientating people. So seeding is of course the kind of thing that we do with the undergraduates and then with the postgraduate taught degrees, and maybe also with our research postgraduates. Like we're filling the CDR workforce bottom up, right? So they come from university, etc. But that is fantastic because I think what is one of the really nice things about CDR is that the space has been driven really by university graduates that have had great ideas and a lot of enthusiasm, right? So that's really what is needed. But as these organizations grow and start to develop multi-million or multi-billion-dollar projects, then that enthusiasm and kind of great thinking also needs to be complemented with experience. So how do you do contracts management for a multi-million or billion-dollar project? How do you do project management? How do you do human resource management? These kind of questions, right? As you grow, and some of the companies have really expanded very rapidly. And then that's where this reorientating comes into play. So people with 10, 20, maybe 30 years of experience that have an established career in another field, maybe want to be part of the future, want to transition into CDR. So that was really identified as an opportunity and also as kind of a clear need for education that was missing currently. So I think that was for me one of the main highlights. And we also kind of we responded to that. So we're currently developing the first ever continuing professional development course for STEM professionals that want to transition to CDR. And it's going to be launched in September, and it's going to be completely online. So anybody from the globe can participate. We're very excited about that one.
Do you have a link or anything like that you could share with the audience right now? Or is
Not yet.
Not
that
officially
would be
launched?
great.
Okay.
No,
Let us know
when
it's live so that we can share that with the Carbon Removal Challenge participants.
Yeah,
it seems
we'll definitely do.
Like an amazing opportunity for them, and this is part of the reason why we're doing this. So, Chris, your organization represents around 60 carbon removal companies. So you are coming from like sort of the hiring end of this, right? So you're like, what kind of skills and abilities are you looking for? Do you have any sort of case studies on like workforce development plans or things that you would like to see that you're not currently seeing in sort of creating that workforce for these companies?
Yeah, so I should specify that I don't do any hiring for the member companies. Of course, they do their own hiring, but I do talk to them about what their needs are, because our mission is not just to do the kind of the policy outreach work. with the European Union, with national governments and international bodies like the UNFCCC and the SBTI and others, but also to be thinking about what we can do to bring maturity to the sector and structure and discipline and things like that. So, and one of those pieces is obviously making sure that the industry has what it needs to grow in the future, and that includes human resources as well. So I think the answer to your question really it depends. That's a great university answer for you, but it depends very much on the kind of CDR company that you're talking about. And you know, the vast majority of my members, I think the vast majority of the space is very much a kind of startup or very small scale up kind of space where companies are somewhere between, you know, 2 and let's say 50 or 60 employees. And they are beginning, particularly as they get towards the kind of 30, 40, 50 kind of scale, they are beginning to think more strategically about their hiring. But at a kind of small scale, when you're really in startup mode, that's quite untypical. So they're much more looking for someone right now with this skill, and then they'll think about a kind of a longer term strategy in the future. There are parts of the CDR sector, however, which are quite different and which are much larger organizations with more kind of infrastructure and bureaucracy and more ability to think long term about how they plan their human resources. And so examples of that would be typically BECCS, so bioenergy with CCS companies, which most of the time are companies which are coming from you know, district heating or waste to energy, or from converting coal plants to biomass plants. And those companies tend to be large established companies which are moving into, you know, which are changing their technology and changing their business model, but still have the kind of legacy of many thousands of employees, and therefore the structures that you need to build careers and have, you know, career development and training, etc. So I think those companies are already well advanced and well equipped in terms of developing their long-term strategic visions. Another example would be what seems to be an increasing trend, which is the link between direct air capture and oil and gas. So I think it's still true to say that the vast majority of the direct air capture sector is not linked to the oil and gas industry, but the oil and gas industry, and I think in particular Oxy or Occidental, large parts of that industry have their eye on direct air capture as a great place to invest in CDR because of a number of synergies, notably to do with CO2 transportation and storage, and also some of the kind of chemistry of direct air capture and the chemistry of other kinds of work that they do with oil and gas. So those companies, and if you look at Carbon Engineering or Holocene, which are the two kind of well-known direct air capture companies that were recently acquired by Oxy, I would have thought, I don't know this for sure, but I would have thought that their employees' kind of career developments and that their hiring strategies are well integrated into the kind of the bigger mothership at Oxy. So I think that would be the kind of how I'd characterize this kind of duality between the very small unplanned growth part of the sector, which is the majority of the organizations, and then the smaller number of larger organizations which are very planned. We are very interested in looking at this in a kind of much more systematic way. So we're hoping to carry out with some research partners a study into what the needs of the sector are, at least with a European scale to start off with. And we've already done, as part of that, like a sort of a mini pilot, asking some of our members what they think are key considerations for how they can build their human resources in the future. And some really interesting things came out of that, notably, for example, very strong messaging from leaders about the need to have flexible immigration policies so that they can hire the best talent from around the world, particularly at the kind of earliest stages of their development, where the skills and the knowledge necessary may not be ubiquitous. So this is really important for them.
Yeah, I think if you wanted some academic partners on that research you were talking about, maybe there's a couple of people on this panel who might be possible people you could collaborate with on that. We would love for that to have started here. So XiaoYu, you are faculty at a university that has a very productive carbon removal program. And I know you want to continue Waterloo's dominance in this area, but if any of the people who are watching this wanted to, primarily students wanted to get their universities closer to Waterloo's level, do you have any recommendations for what they could do to sort of emulate what you've done there, sort of like ways of getting funding or support from the university?
Right. So that's a very good question. So I think so what we are doing at Waterloo, as also Mijndert also mentioned, the concept is that we are planting a seed here, right? So we are not I also read the article in the Nature article, right? So it's very difficult to identify a program that is just for CDR, right? Because CDR is such a diverse and interdisciplinary concept that we need a top students of different skills, right? Like mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, and even environmental engineer, policymakers, economists as well. So in Waterloo, what we are planning here is just plant the seed, right? To tell students that, oh, we have these ideas, that this is a cool ideas that we have, and a lot of companies, there are bigger companies, also startup companies are working on these. So you might be able to contribute some of your skill sets, right? So that is why we work with the Engineers Without Borders, and then so basically every term we have the leaders in the student group will recruit students to join this student design team, and because it's in Waterloo, we have this culture that we actually have a lot of different student design team, and carbon removal, and this is just one of them. And so actually we are competing with other student design team for this talent as well, right? But it's very good that we plant a seed in the students and tell them that we have this group, and what you can learn from this group is a very interdisciplinary, right? We have chemical engineering looking at the solvents, where we have mechanical engineering engineers building these structures. We also have mechatronics students building all these sensors, where we need a lot of different components in the device. So by working it's mainly the students working together by learning from each other. I think this is how we form this student team and form this culture and make it sustain. So does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, I remember when I was at Waterloo, there was like a solar car on display there that I think had won some sort of competition,
Exactly.
which was also like very inspiring because part of what made us decide to do the carbon removal challenge at OpenAir was looking at how solar had become this dominant climate technology, and the solar car races and other solar competitions had started in the early 90s, and 30 years later the solar is like where it is now at this sort of exponential growth, and we need that same sort of growth for carbon removal. So that's sort of what started us to down this path. So we've got a few questions coming in the Q&A, and I know Mijndert's been on top of it, responding to them, but I think I'll ask them of the group just to make sure that everyone's got opportunities to respond. So one question came in from James. If I wanted a job in carbon removal, where should I look? Which companies and areas? So Mijndert posted CDR jobs. I'm going to actually put that into the chat as well for everyone to see, as a great resource for finding work within the carbon removal industry. Does anyone else have any suggestions? And I was also interested in the areas part. Do you think there's specific parts of the world that are more favorable towards carbon removal employment than others? This question, any of you can answer. Yeah, go ahead, Chris. You don't have to raise your hand. You can just
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of geographical areas, I think a great way to start is to look at the map produced by CDR.FYI, which you can find online at CDR.FYI. And they've done some great analysis of well, they're just tracking the kind of the flow of deals of carbon removal sales that are happening around the world. And they're tracking the names and locations of companies in the CDR space. And so you can look there and see if there's someone in your country who is involved in CDR. You can filter by technology approach, all kinds of things. I think broadly speaking, the vast majority, I'd say 80% of the global industry today is located in North America and Europe. But there are quite a few interesting other companies in South America, in Africa, notably in Kenya, in India, and other parts of Asia. So it's quite broadly spread, but I think with a currently a heavy tilt in North America and Europe, I would say that it's important for us as an industry that we not continue to develop as a kind of heavily North American and European industry, but that we really globalize, because otherwise we won't be successful.
Yeah, Kenya is great that you mentioned that. The Octavia Carbon, which is a big carbon removal company there, they actually were OpenAir members who sort of built off some of the early work that we did in open hardware development, and they're took it miles ahead of where we were. But yeah, Kenya is really trying to be a big player in the carbon removal space. So yeah, anyone else have any other thoughts on looking for employment?
I'd like to jump right in because well, for a couple of reasons. But so I think from the Oxford and Washington workshops, we also really clearly got that steer, right? So it's fun, and it's nice that we have these workshops in the UK and then in North America, but by all means don't forget about the rest of the world. So we didn't. So we were invited to co-host the Africa Carbon Removal Summit last week in Kenya. So I went there, and the second day of the summit was also a workshop. It was a little bit broader than the first ones, but not only focused on research and let's say human capacity, but also on what other hurdles are there still in place for CDR to develop at large scale, right? And so there's I think Chris, you may have seen the same, but I think the enthusiasm was amazing there. The people that lead the way there are extremely bright and motivated and have a lot of energy. So I really hope that can become one of the CDR hubs in the world. Maybe this also links to one of the questions that's posted in the chat. I don't know if it's about the cost of courses, right, or the cost of training. And so I understand that indeed it may not be feasible for everybody to pay for courses, and I think we are thinking of ways to make things accessible. For instance, we're talking to some foundations for sponsoring scholarships for the course, for instance. So that's one option. Another option that I discussed last week with folks in Kenya is to again try and found summer school series on CDR. So bring people from the whole of Africa to one location and teach them on CDR. I mean, again, that there's a little bit of funding needed to organize that. But so I think we're definitely looking at ways, and what we would like to achieve is that we kind of expand to a global network of CDR educators, if you will, that all contribute to making this happen.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I just wanted to say, I mean, if this is really to be a gigaton per annum kind of industry, we need heaps of people.
Yeah, and that's why, with the carbon removal challenge, we decided to go global right away, even though it was a heavy lift for us. But we really wanted this to be something that um, spread around the world and gave opportunities to people from other parts of the world. And I'm happy to say every year we've had at least one team that is not from North America. And we've had teams from Japan, Australia. This year we had teams finalists from all those countries. This year we've had submissions from every continent except for Antarctica. And there is a University of Antarctica, and I want to contact them and just get them, even if it's just a token submission, so we could say all the continents. But I think it'd be great to have someone from there submit. But we got our first South American team this year. But we've always done really well in Africa, Asia, and we're starting to do better in Europe and really spread around the world. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat about schools that are good for entering the carbon removal industry. Feel free to plug your own schools again if you want to for this, but if you want to, if you have any other suggestions for people, because maybe they don't live in the same vicinity, or it would be easier to go to other locations for them, it would be great if you could talk about those universities as well.
Maybe I can start. So I think it's quite difficult to say which school is the best for CDR, right? Because it's such a interdisciplinary topic, as I mentioned, right? So I think when you're, for example, if you are students that really want to get into the CDR industry, right? I think maybe develop some skill sets. For example, if you are an engineer that you want to get into the industry, to maybe to see whether there's good engineering schools, right? And if you are business and if you are economists or policy making oriented students, right, to see where there are the good schools locally or in the world that are good for these different subjects, right? And another thing I think also maybe Mijndert also mentioned that there are a lot of reorientations in the future, right? So because this is a nascent industry, right? At the beginning, there's limited amount of job, right? A lot of them are startups, as Chris mentioned, right? So they might not be hiring a lot of people at the beginning, and they might be looking at a very specific skill set of a person, right? That they are hiring. But then when the industry grow, right, there are a lot of other different opportunities. So I have a student who started. He actually one of the first the hackathon winners, right? So when he was looking for a job, he started as he's a nanotechnology student, right? So he started on locally, so he found a job locally in Waterloo area to develop new materials, nanomaterials for some startups, right? But later he found new opportunity in BC, and that is for carbon capture, and it's also another startup, right? So then because he built on his skill set of nanotechnology, and then he have some work experience, so he was able to secure the next job that is in the field that he's interested in, right? So I think there are lots of opportunities, and I think what we would like the students to develop is some strong skill set, right? Either in engineering or in policy or business. And I think if you are interested in this field, there will be opportunity in the future. Yeah.
Mijndert, do you want to chime in with suggestions for people who are looking for programs that are strong for getting into the carbon removal industry?
Yeah, you know what? There's actually quite a few, so I wouldn't know where to start, and I also don't want to here only market ourselves. So there's quite a few, both in Canada and North America and Europe. I would want to make an argument for kind of embedding CDR in university programs worldwide, right? Because as we said, there are loads of regions in the world that hold kind of massive resource in terms of CDR, be it the right kind of soil or sufficient biomass or sufficient solar irradiation and humidity that you need for some types of CDR. So I don't know. I think maybe instead of making an argument for going to this one school or that one school, I would say let's try to get CDR into as many curricula as we can. And then the choice doesn't have to be very difficult, and then it's also not limited to, you know, maybe some of the more kind of more expensive private universities, for instance, because that, you know, that goes against maybe a little bit what the whole spirit of CDR is about.
Yeah, I definitely think that sort of democratization of carbon removal is obviously we're very supportive of that at OpenAir. That's sort of our whole deal. But I do think, you know, I guess, is there a specific, you know, I think a lot of people, when they think of carbon removal, they primarily think of direct air carbon capture. Um, but there's other, you know, there's regenerative agriculture, enhanced rock weathering, biochar. There's like numerous bikers. I shouldn't throw out acronyms because not maybe not everyone knows them. But my overall point is that there's lots of different ways to do carbon removal. Um, is there any specific focus for that you think that there's maybe opportunities or more opportunities for sort of young people, entry level people just getting out of school to sort of get into the industry that way? And yeah, anyone can feel free to answer.
You know, I know the primary workforce for carbon removals is going to be the kind of the engineering, the scientific research, the measuring, monitoring, reporting, verification, the kind of the technical STEM kind of STEM skill type of community. But this is going to be a very large industry, which, you know, will have lots of other support functions. There'll be lawyers working for carbon removal companies doing contracts. There'll be accountants doing the financing. So you know, I think, like Mijndert, I wouldn't be focused so much on you know, a specific subset of the world's universities which are specialized in the technology of CDR. But look at every university as a place that could give you the skills that you might want to get into. So and as I've posted now in the chat, not in the Q&A, but in the chat, there's a, you know, a kind of a statement of values and principles from the CDR community, which we put out at the end of September, which has attracted quite a large number of signatures from CDR organizations, which we hope is a way to kind of reach out to the world and take people who are in university or going to university or not even that, but who are just interested in carbon removals, as a way to kind of coalesce people around a clearly well understood consensus set of statements about what CDR is and is not. You know, what's the difference between CDR and CCS, for example, or between CDR and geoengineering, and why should you be, you know, what is it about CDR that should be interesting to you, as opposed to anything else? So we hope that helps and inspires. But in general, you know, I'm not a scientist and I'm in CDR. I'm working on the policy frameworks primarily for CDR, trying to make sure that that governments put in the right kind of money and regulations to create CDR as an industry. You know, I studied languages at university. I have a degree in German and then a master's in political science. So you know, that's a skill set which is proving very useful right now, and I think will continue to do so in future. So don't think of this just as a scientific discipline.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Did anyone else want to respond to that? It made me think before we started the webinar, I was actually talking about someone brought up the fact that I'm actually a professor of game design, which is maybe the furthest thing people would expect to be involved in carbon removal. So yeah, I think there is a myriad of skills and talents and abilities that you can apply, and you know, carbon removal is a all hands on deck type of situation. But there is a question that I see that it's interesting. It's about how the change in administration has affected U.S. CDR opportunities. And I think it'd be interesting to hear this panel respond to it, as none of you are American or in America right now. So I guess, what is the sort of outside perspective on what's going on politically in the U.S. and its impact on carbon removal within the US and maybe more broadly in the world? Go ahead,
I don't
Chris.
I don't want to monopolize, so I stick my hand up. But yeah, I mean, I think this is super interesting, and of course, the kind of political temperature is changing around the world on environment and in different ways in different places. Um, Certainly, the the US as one of the kind of key let's say breeding grounds for carbon removal technologies and investment in particular is really important. It's the single most important country in CDR globally, um, and it's quite clear that there's a big psychological impact of the Trump administration's policies on the CDR community. I think there's also a clear financial impact. A lot of projects that thought they were getting money from the US government are either not getting the money from the US government or unclear if they're getting money from the US government. And at the very, at best, that creates incredible uncertainty about what the investment environment is like for carbon removals in the US. And therefore a lot of people are simply looking to regions which do not have that kind of uncertainty and the level of threat that hangs over. There were rumors this week about the administration withdrawing tax exemption status from nonprofits that have climate in their mission. Apparently that's not true, but the fact that this is even a rumor is damaging to the sector. And certainly as a Brussels-based organization representing the global CDR industry, I've already been approached by a number of companies, both American and non-American, about membership of our association because Europe is perceived as a much safer place right now for investment in carbon removals, and companies that were previously focused on commercial opportunities in the US are now much more interested in commercial opportunities in Europe. Now, I don't know whether Europe is capable of sustaining that kind of stability on carbon removals or climate generally, because there's also a fair degree of climate skepticism here in Europe, and there has been a rightward shift in the politics, which tends to be more climate skeptic. But at the moment, I have definitely detected a shift in interest and people moving their radar from a US focused radar to a European focused radar.
So you, Mijndert, either of you have any more to add to that?
Maybe just reiterate the importance of stable policy. So the EU has often been criticized for being slow in its decision making, for needing to have unanimity on many topics, not all, but on many. But it's actually not so bad sometimes. Slow but stable can be better than very ambitious but going from left to right the whole time. Yeah, because this doesn't help, right? If indeed a lot of decisions, company decisions, with a lot of money involved, are being taken based on certain policies, and then there's uncertainty on whether these policies will continue, that is detrimental to any sector. And that's not just CDR, of course. That's any sector really. Anecdotally, I mean, so anecdotally, 3 years ago, the UK CCS RC conference, CCS is not CDR, I know that, but I work in both fields. And there was a Chinese scholar who was saying, or who was presenting all the different projects that were actually happening in China. And at that point in the UK, we were still talking about projects happening. But he in his modesty, he asked us for advice, and the chair of the conference said, "But we should be asking you for advice, because you guys are apparently doing it, and we're just debating." That has luckily changed. So in the UK, spades have gone into the ground as well, which is good. and in other countries too. And by the way, that will help CDR because CO2 transport and storage infrastructure, built for CCS will also facilitate CDR, of course, some CDR forms at least. But I think that also goes to show that long-term planning, like in some countries have that, and China is a very good example of it, of course. But long-term planning can just help because it creates the security for companies to invest and for companies to grow and attract people, etc.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, to that point, I will say as an American, my feeling about it is that maybe it's not a bad thing that America won't be leading on this in the near future, or hopefully other things in the near future. Maybe it's time for America to have a diminished impact on the world.
But I don't. Okay, this easily becomes a political discussion. I just maybe I should avoid doing that. But I mean, I don't understand. I have the impression that in some ways, then America would be shooting themselves in the foot, right? Because if it, if you do not progress on something which is clearly an industry and a multi-trillion-dollar industry of the future, then you're going to be a lagger, right? If you're not leading, you're going to lag. And if other world regions are willing to take up the ball, then to my mind, it doesn't seem like the right approach. But yeah, that's just my humble opinion.
Yeah, I will just say that the climate in the US, no pun intended, is kind of as you were both saying, is so volatile that I think it might be less helpful for the US to be seen as the leader on this or other things at this point in time, because you can't just constantly be switching from not just like left to right, but like extremes that make it hard for anyone to sort of understand what's coming next. So we do have one last question in the chat, and I think it's primarily from Mijndert. Can you speak more about the findings of the workshop and the article? So do you want to just share a little bit more about what you figured out from having the workshop, we wrote in the article, and are you planning to do more of that type of work?
Yeah. So yes, I think one of the other things that was mentioned, and that's important, is the importance of experiential learning. So learning through placements, through internships, etc. So not just doing things basically in the lecture theater, but also doing things in real life, and whether that's through a competition like your own, and the great work that XiaoYu is doing with the teams at Waterloo, or whether that is by doing a placement or an internship at one of the CDR related organizations. That I think it's both equally important. But I mean, this also relates to a very clear need, right? There were companies that were telling us, look, we advertise positions or internships, so we actually get heaps of applications, but it's very difficult for us to understand which candidates can be good. And by the way, we're a small company with indeed 10, 20, 30 people. So we don't have the capacity to go through all the CVs and understand who is really good. So wouldn't it be great if people, if there were kind of a like almost a quality criterion that people can bring, like I have this amount of knowledge on CDR, for instance. And again, that's another call for embedding more CDR in curriculum. But I think, yeah, linking formal training to kind of on the job training is really important.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope this was an inspiration to our attendees and to people who are watching this on YouTube later. It's really exciting, for all the bumps and turbulence that might be going on in the US right now. I think it's a really exciting time for carbon removal in the US and globally. And this year was our biggest year for the Carbon Removal Challenge. We had 53 universities, I believe, 53 teams this year, which was a record for us, almost double what we'd had in previous years. And the quality of submissions was just keeps getting better. This year was kind of like a quantum leap over last year. So I think that we're going to try and do our part to get that workforce of tomorrow ready for being in the world. And we really appreciate the work that you're all doing, trying to create that pathway as well. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see those of you in the audience next time for our next webinar.
Many thanks, Matt.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks very much.